A spokesperson for the Department of Education told CNN the Department of Education will begin beta testing the student debt relief website. During the beta testing website period, borrowers will not be able to submit applications, or they will be able to submit applications for the Biden-Harris's administration student debt relief program. CNN has reported that anyone who applies for the debt relief in the beta period will receive a confirmation email, but the application will not be processed until the site formally launches. Once processing begins, most qualifying borrowers are expected to receive debt relief within weeks. The spokesperson also continued that these borrowers will also not need to reapply if they resubmit their application during a beta test, but no applications will be processed until the site officially launches later this month. Borrowers must have also federally held student loans to qualify. The Education Department will work to determine applicants' eligibility, and once approved, it will notify borrowers that their applications were sent to loan servicers to process debt relief. According to CNBC News, those loan services also ultimately will inform borrowers that relief has been applied, in addition to providing any details about outstanding loan balances and monthly payments, everybody. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of stimulus checks, whole bunch of information to know. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, here's some important news. It's finally happening. Financial relief is actually underway for millions of Americans. Many people are expecting to receive thousands of dollars in extra stimulus cash, and you can get yours right now. Now, a fresh round of inflation data last week has been released, and it showed high prices, raising more questions about whether the Fed interest rate hikes are missing what many economists contend are the real inflationary culprits: corporate pricing, energy costs, and supply chain disruptions. The news is further stirring fears of unnecessary economic pain that should the Fed push America into recession. One economist told reporters raising interest rates is not working, and the Fed's overly aggressive actions are shoving our economy to the brink of devastating recession. Supply chain bottlenecks, a volatile global energy market, and rampant corporate profiteering cannot be solved by additional rate hikes, everybody. So, the Fed has some economists maintain that demand generated by a labor market that is hot and higher wages are driving inflation, and higher unemployment and interest rates are the solution. To that end, the Fed has hiked rates 5 times in 2022 and indicated more increases are to come. Moves the Federal Reserve Jerome Powell has acknowledged that there was going to bring some pain to households and businesses. Now, data shows the Fed is actually making some progress on this, and its aims to fix mortgage rates and soaring home and sales are plummeting. Meanwhile, the last employment numbers are showing a sharp decline in job openings, as well as slowing job and wage growth. But Thursday's consumer price index numbers for September revealed the approach has yielded few gains on pricing. Inflation inched up again 8.2%, while month-to-month declined 0.1% in August and again in September. Now, a former Fed economist told reporters that the price drops are not materializing because current inflation largely is not demand or labor-driven, as it is often during inflationary periods. High inflation is not workers' fault, but the Fed is waging a war on U.S. workers, and now the Federal Reserve Board Vice Chair even acknowledged that the roles of pricing and supply chain disruptions are actually affecting many businesses across the country. Because skyrocketing demand for durable goods coupled with supply chain problems created enormous pricing power for companies that they can't deal with, for companies that stock on hand at least. Typically, corporations attempt to widen margins by suppressing wages, but that changed during the crisis. And with Americans still in shock over jaw-dropping rising gas prices, a few proposals have floated around Congress offering some relief to drivers. In a bid to combat inflation and rising gas prices, the Chicago City Council has introduced the Chicago Moves Initiative. It aims to issue up to $50,000 and 50,000 prepaid gas cards of $150 and 100,000 prepaid transit cards of $50 to eligible residents across the city.
From Massachusetts, Mr. Auchincloss, who is also the vice chair of the full committee, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Long hearing, almost done. As we've been in this hearing, the Fed announced a 75 basis point increase. The Fed chairman is channeling his inner Volcker and is committing publicly to using the full freight of monetary policy to reverse QE and rein in inflation. His greatest asset in this endeavor is going to be his credibility as an inflation fighter. By a show of hands, how many of you have confidence in the Fed's resolve through 22 and 2023 to pursue its mandate of price stability? It's a show of confidence from Wall Street in Governor Powell. The best way to reduce inflation, though, is to expand the productive capacity of our economy. Mr. Diamond, you said this in your remarks. That means raising labor force participation rates and perhaps most impactfully, building more housing. At the state and local level, that means pushing back on NIMBY opposition to multifamily housing in particular. At the federal level, what can government and big banks do together to help build more affordable housing, not just to finance it? Mr. Monahan, because our home state of Massachusetts is so crucially under the weight of housing costs, I'd like you to answer first, and then anybody else can jump in.
So if you're talking about developers, first of all, the financing that we all do as an industry, the financing our company does, about $5 billion a year in housing, low-income, moderate-income housing, low-income housing tax credits. In terms of development, one of the perceptions is we got to create more development. So a group of my colleagues in Charlotte, we created $60 million of equity to go into more developers to close that gap. We're working in Boston to see if we can put together the same kind of program on the theory that there's a need to develop more developers who can do more work, but it's a universal problem, whether it's in Charlotte with 20, 30,000 housing unit shorts, Boston the same thing, New York City. Getting housing developments fast is critically important, but it's a multifaceted question which requires us to think about university housing, it requires us to think about kids that work for us in New York City.
Awesome news, everybody. More and more state governments have proposed new stimulus relief. Also, new changes have been made, and so now Social Security, SSI, and SSDI beneficiaries are eligible for received boosted relief benefits. And now here's an update on the latest stimulus proposals. California state lawmakers approved a $300 billion budget this week, but several key sticking points remain between California Governor Gavin Newsom and the lawmakers, which could drag on negotiations on a final spending plan. Under the California law, the governor must sign the spending plan by June 30th, in time for the state's new fiscal year to begin on July 1st. Often many budget details are worked out and approved in the weeks following those constitutional deadlines, which are referred to as budget trailer bills. That appears to be the case once again this year, as top lawmakers and Governor Newsom continue to negotiate over exactly how to spend a historic $98 billion surplus. The budget approved by the legislature early this week includes a record amount of money for public schools and higher education, as well as a total of $40 billion for budgetary reserves. That is nearly the amount in savings before the crisis in 2019. It also includes the $40 billion for infrastructure, projects, and funding to make Medi-Cal available for every low-income resident. Despite the budget's large size, there are still many lawmakers and the governor to work out. Republican Assembly member Vince Fong said the approved budget fails to address critical crises facing their state. Fong, who is a top Republican on the Assembly Budget Committee, criticized Democrats for passing an incomplete spending plan to meet their deadline and planning to fill in the gaps later. Other resolved issues include rebates to address skyrocketing gas prices and inflation, as well as reimbursement rate increases for state-sponsored childcare, providers, and disability insurance. Another sticking point between top lawmakers and Newsom is the size and eligibility for a tax relief package aimed at helping Californians cope with inflation and record-high gas prices. Newsom proposed sending $400 per vehicle up to $800 to car owners to offset the rising cost of fuel. Leaders in the Assembly and State Senate have insisted on targeting tax relief to lower-income residents who spend a higher percentage of their income on necessities like housing and transportation and are hit hard by inflation. Lawmakers unveiled their own plan to send $200 per person, with an additional $200 per dependent for individuals earning up to $125,000 for families. And in a statement after the legislature's budget was passed, Newsom's office said the governor would like to see more immediate relief to help millions of more Americans with rising gas prices and rent prices and grocery price increases. They were also noting Newsom's plan would spend about $3.5 billion more on